All right, strap in, because today's deep dive takes us to the edge of science, into a world where water, plain old H2O, supposedly transforms into a source of unlimited energy. We're talking about Joe cells. Ever heard of them?
I have a feeling we're about to wade into some pretty unconventional territory.
You got that right. Picture this. A simple device, some say it looks like a thermos filled with water. You hook it up to your car and boom, you're cruising down the highway powered by, well, restructured water. That's the claim, at least, according to some passionate folks on Agora Road's Macintosh Cafe forum.
Sounds a bit like something out of a science fiction novel, doesn't it?
It does. And that's where our deep dive begins. This forum thread is buzzing with believers and skeptics battling it out over the legitimacy of Joe cells. We've got links to videos claiming to show the technology in action, whispers of government cover-ups, and even folks saying this could solve the energy crisis.
This is one of those topics where a healthy dose of skepticism is definitely in order. Extraordinary claims, right?
Absolutely, but that's what makes it so fascinating. So let's break down what we've got. The initial forum post that caught our eye comes from a user named Irialas. They describe Joe cells as these devices with very specific dimensions that can supposedly use electricity to, and I'm quoting here, restructure water, turning it into a combustible fuel source.
Okay, restructure is doing a lot of heavy lifting there. What does that even mean in this context?
Right. That's one of the first things that jumped out at me, too. Irrelays and a few others on the forum throw around terms like orgone energy and resonant frequencies, buzzwords that sound super sciencey but lack clear explanations.
And that lack of clarity is often a red flag when we're evaluating these kinds of unconventional claims.
Exactly. Now, Irrelays does link to some videos on Rumble showing what they claim are Joe cells in action. There are demonstrations of water supposedly burning as fuel, and even a method for desalinating seawater using magnets.
Visuals can be compelling, but we have to remember that seeing isn't always believing, especially in the age of clever editing and special effects.
For sure. And that's where our critical thinking caps really come in handy. Plus, Irrelazy points to a website called Joe Cell Water Science as the ultimate source of truth on all things Joe Cell. But guess what? Even on the website, the explanations are pretty vague. There's a lot of talk about this revolutionary technology, but very little concrete information on how it actually works.
It's interesting, isn't it? If this technology were as groundbreaking as they claim, you'd think there would be a more concerted effort to explain it clearly and transparently.
Right. And that's where the skeptics on the forum really start to poke holes in the Joe Cell theory. One user, Pump, brings up a really important point. Where's the scientific evidence? We're talking about potentially upending our entire understanding of physics and energy, but there's no peer-reviewed research, no independent verification, no one seemingly able to replicate these results in a controlled setting.
It's a valid concern. Anecdotal evidence and personal testimonies can be compelling, but they don't hold the same weight as rigorous scientific testing.
Exactly. Pump also points out the language being used about all this talk of water memory and thinking outside the box, which are often associated with pseudoscience and can make it difficult to separate fact from fiction.
And the website Pump mentioned, Joe Cell Water Science, doesn't do much to alleviate those concerns. It reads more like a sales pitch than a scientific document. They mentioned that Joe, the inventor, seems more interested in selling lessons and tours for those willing to pay for his knowledge than actually explaining the technology in an accessible way.
Almost like a come see for yourself, but it'll cost you kind of vibe. And that's when things take a turn for the even more intriguing. Remember those videos on Rumble that supposedly showed Joe cells in action? Well, the cameraman from those videos, a user named Merlin, decides to join the forum party.
Oh boy, this is where the story really kicks into overdrive, doesn't it?
You know it. Merlin doesn't just dip his toes in the water. He dives headfirst into the deep end, claiming to be a co-developer of the Joe cell with Joe himself. And get this, he claims to be an expert in etheric physics.
Etheric physics. Okay, for our listeners who aren't familiar with that term, it's a concept from 19th century physics that proposed the existence of this invisible medium called ether that was thought to fill all of space and allow light to travel. But here's the thing, experiments later disproved the existence of ether. It's not something that's considered scientifically valid anymore.
Right, like trying to bring back bell-bottoms and disco? It had its moment, but science has moved on. So to have someone claiming expertise in etheric physics in the context of a revolutionary energy technology, well, it definitely raises eyebrows.
It's like claiming expertise in using leeches to cure diseases. While those practices existed, they've been largely debunked by modern medicine.
Exactly. But Merlin doesn't stop there. He goes on to spin a tale that's equal parts fascinating and, let's just say, out there. He talks about building a 3-story pyramid house that he says is enchanted, whatever that means. And if that wasn't enough, he throws in a casual mention of his wife levitating.
It's at this point in the forum thread that some users start to question whether Merlin is being serious or engaging in some elaborate trolling.
Right, you're reading through the thread and it's like, wait, did he really just say that? But then he doubles down and starts talking about curing diseases, purifying sewage, and inventing things like an aqua chai foot bath that's supposed to have these miraculous healing properties, all thanks to his understanding of water and energy.
The Aqua Chi foot bath is particularly interesting. He claims to have personally witnessed it cure the incurables and talks about it being based on the principles of magnetic healing water. Again, we see this reliance on vague terminology that lacks any real scientific backing.
It's like he's speaking a different language, a language of extraordinary claims without the evidence to support them. And this is where the skeptics in the forum really start to push back. Pump, who we mentioned earlier, directly challenges Merlin, questioning how he can reconcile his claims with basic scientific principles.
And Wanham, another skeptical voice in the forum, expresses frustration with what they see as Merlin's rambling and often contradictory statements. They call him out for not providing clear explanations and for relying on anecdotal evidence rather than verifiable data.
Yeah, 1M seems particularly annoyed, like they're trying to follow a recipe with steps missing and measurements written in a language they don't understand.
Well,
They keep asking for concrete proof, but Merlin doesn't seem interested in providing any.
it's a classic clash between belief and skepticism. You have Merlin, who seems utterly convinced of the validity of his experiences, and then you have other users like Pump and Wanham who are approaching his claims with a healthy dose of doubt, demanding evidence to back up the extraordinary assertions.
It's like watching a tennis match, with each side volleying back and forth belief versus skepticism, anecdote versus evidence. And as we delve deeper into this forum thread, that back and forth only intensifies. So where does this leave us? With Joe Sells, I mean, are we talking about a revolution in energy or just, more smoke and mirrors?
Well, it's tricky, right? The forum doesn't exactly give us a neat answer wrapped up in a bow, but it does show you how much people want new energy sources, how these kind of out there ideas are really appealing, and how important it is to back things up with evidence, especially online where anyone can say anything.
Yeah, it's like on the one hand, we've got a planet in trouble, needing cleaner energy, so folks are going to grab on to any hope they can find.
Exactly. And science, well, it's always moving forward. Who's to say there aren't things about the universe we haven't even dreamed of yet? Maybe there's more to water than we think.
Which brings us back to that water memory thing. It sounds totally bonkers at first, like some mystical mumbo-jumbo. But what if, just what if, there's a little truth in there? Water's the source of life, right? Could it be holding on to information, like on a deeper level than we realize?
Now, wouldn't that be something? If we could crack the code of water, so to speak. Imagine what that'd mean for medicine, for tech, even understanding our own minds.
And that's what I love about these deep dives. Sure, we started with Joe Sells, but we've landed in this space of pure possibility. Asking the big questions, even if they sound crazy, that's how we learn.
Just got to remember to keep that skeptical hat handy, too. Question everything, look for proof, and if a theory falls apart under scrutiny, well, got to be ready to let it go.
So to everyone listening, keep that sense of wonder, keep digging deeper, and never be afraid to question what you find. That's how we learn and grow.
Absolutely. Keep exploring, keep that curiosity alive, and until next time, keep asking those big questions.